For a man who seems impossible to ignore, very few people actually know the real story behind Tyrus. Most viewers see the sharp one-liners on TV, the wrestling career, the larger-than-life personality. But almost nobody knows how chaotic his life really was behind the scenes. Before he became the man everyone recognizes today, he survived a childhood that left emotional scars, a career full of sudden reinventions, and a list of setbacks that would have crushed most people. And somehow, through all of that noise, there was one person who slowly became the anchor in his life, the woman he kept hidden from the spotlight for years. But the truth is, Tyrus didn't just rise to fame. He had to rebuild himself over and over again, until the world finally paid attention. And once you see what he went through, the controversies he had to navigate, and how his private life quietly shaped every major turn in his career, you'll never look at him the same way again. Because the journey that brought him from a painful childhood to national television wasn't just unexpected, it was a complete transformation. And it all started long before anyone ever called him Tyrus. Before the world ever saw him cracking jokes on TV or throwing opponents across a wrestling ring, Tyrus' life looked nothing like the confident image he carries today. Born George Murdoch in Boston on February 21, 1973, he entered a world that didn't make room for him. His childhood wasn't just unstable, it was shaped by a family divided over who he was. Being biracial in a household that couldn't accept it meant he and his brother were pushed aside in ways most kids could never imagine. And that early rejection didn't fade. It followed him. It marked him. It built a chip on his shoulder that never truly went away. Those early years left him with a strange obsession, trying to change the way he looked, trying to be someone else entirely. It wasn't vanity. It was survival. He learned early on that blending in felt safer than being noticed. But even with all of that emotional weight, he had one advantage: his size. By the time he reached college, he had the build of someone destined for the field. He joined the University of Nebraska at Kearney, ready to turn his strength into a future. Football was supposed to be the escape route, the clean slate, the identity he could finally rely on. Then everything fell apart in an instant. A medical emergency, a ruptured appendix, forced him into surgery that damaged the nerves in his leg. Walking would never feel the same again. His dream of becoming a teacher and building a life through sports disappeared overnight. What was supposed to launch him into his future left him limping away from everything he planned for. It was the kind of blow that would have made most people quit. But instead, it pushed him into a completely different world. One where identity is built, broken, and rebuilt every day. And that's exactly where he was headed next. Even though his first attempt wouldn't go the way he hoped. With his football future gone, Murdoch threw himself into something completely different: professional wrestling. It wasn't glamorous, and it definitely wasn't stable, but it offered something he needed: a chance to reinvent himself from scratch. In 2006, he signed with WWE's developmental territory, Deep South Wrestling, and stepped into the ring with a new attitude. And a character he hoped would stick. It didn't. His first persona was the kind of gimmick that disappears faster than it arrives. A street, thug-style character that never found its footing. He tried to make it work, but in an industry built on charisma, timing, and luck, nothing clicked. By 2008, WWE cut him loose, and just like that, his first shot at wrestling ended before it even really started. Most people would have taken that as a sign to move on. Instead, he disappeared for 2 years, training, working odd jobs, and figuring out how to come back stronger. And when he finally returned in 2010, he showed up with a new name inspired by someone unexpected: Snoop Dogg. Not many fans know he actually worked as the rapper's bodyguard, and the name Brodus Clay was a quiet nod to that connection. This time, the spotlight found him a little more easily. He joined the 4th season of NXT, throwing himself into the competition with a seriousness that caught people off guard. He fought hard, made his debut, and even teamed up with Ted DiBiase for a win. But when the season ended, he landed in second place, close enough to taste success, but still just short of the breakthrough he wanted. Still, he wasn't giving up. WWE kept him around, shifting him into a heavier, more intimidating role as Alberto Del Rio's massive enforcer. It was a step forward, but it wasn't him. He was still searching for the identity that would finally stick. And what he became next, no one saw coming. Just when people thought they had Murdoch figured out, he came back wearing the most unexpected identity in his entire career. The intimidating enforcer vanished, and in his place emerged something straight out of a fever dream, the Funkasaurus. Overnight, he transformed into a dancing, brightly colored, fun-loving character with two hype dancers and a grin that didn't match the man underneath. Fans didn't know what to make of it at first. The guy built like a tank was suddenly hitting dance moves and rolling into the ring with pure joy. And that weirdness worked. Kids loved him. Families loved him. Even the people confused by the gimmick couldn't look away. It was ridiculous, catchy, unforgettable, everything WWE wanted at the time. But there was a problem. Behind all the bright lights and funky music, Murdoch knew this version of himself wasn't built to last. The character was entertaining, but it trapped him in a box he couldn't fight his way out of. You can't stay goofy forever in a business where reinvention is currency. And eventually, the momentum faded. By 2014, WWE released him again. No build-up. No dramatic exit. Just gone. After years of trying different roles, surviving setbacks, and reshaping himself again and again, he was suddenly back at square one. Only this time, he wasn't willing to disappear quietly. Because the next version of Murdoch wouldn't be funny, flashy, or goofy at all. It would be the toughest, most serious, most intimidating persona he ever took on, and it would carry his real name forward in a whole new way. After leaving WWE, Murdoch didn't slow down. He shifted into something tougher, darker, and closer to his real personality. Stepping into TNA, now Impact Wrestling, in 2014, he dropped the flashy persona and took on a name that sounded far more like the man he had become, Tyrus. This time, he wasn't trying to entertain with dance breaks. He was a powerhouse, a fixer, and a threat the moment he walked through the curtain. Aligning with EC3 gave him renewed momentum, and the audience finally saw a version of him that didn't feel forced or exaggerated. He was sharp, intimidating, and fully in control of his character. His alliances shifted, his feuds got heavier, and for the first time in years, he wasn't trapped behind a gimmick. He wrestled with purpose, building credibility and rebuilding his confidence. But what came next pushed him into the strongest years of his entire wrestling career. When he joined the National Wrestling Alliance in 2021, everything clicked. He did exactly what most people thought he couldn't do. He dominated. He grabbed the NWA Television Championship, defended it repeatedly, and eventually set his sights on something bigger. Using the Lucky 7 rule, he vacated his title to chase the one prize that had always been out of reach. In 2022, he captured the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, marking the peak of his wrestling journey. It was the validation he'd been chasing across decades, gimmicks, failures, and comebacks. But the climb didn't last forever. In 2023, in a high-stakes bull rope match loaded with emotion and consequences, he lost the title to EC3, and with the loss came a forced retirement. His time in the ring officially ended that night. He walked away from wrestling with the weight of a long career behind him, but also with a strange sense of clarity. Because without wrestling consuming his life, he finally had space to step into something completely different. Something no one expected, and something that would make him more recognizable than ever before. And that next chapter didn't start in a ring. It started under studio lights. Tyrus' most surprising career shift didn't come with a contract or a character change. It started with an invitation. In 2016, Fox News host Greg Gutfeld asked him to appear as a guest commentator on The Greg Gutfeld Show. It could have been a one-time moment, but something clicked instantly. His humor, timing, and blunt delivery resonated with viewers. People didn't just like him, they wanted more. Gutfeld brought him back again, and again, until Tyrus became a regular face on the show. Suddenly, the wrestler who had worn every kind of gimmick imaginable became the unexpected breakout personality of late-night political commentary. His presence spread across the network. He contributed to the Daily Briefing with Dana Perino, made frequent appearances on multiple Fox programs, and eventually landed hosting duties. He launched UNPC, premiered Enough Said on Fox Nation, and by 2023, he was hosting Fox News Saturday Night. Then came another leap, his own series on Outkick, Maintaining with Tyrus. The man who once struggled to hold onto a spot in wrestling now had his own show, a loyal audience, and a completely reinvented public image. But as his TV career kept climbing, the part of his life he rarely talked about, the quiet, steady part, was happening off camera. And the person at the center of that hidden world was the woman who changed everything for him. By the time Tyrus began finding his place in television, there was one part of his life the public barely knew existed, the woman who quietly kept everything from falling apart behind the scenes. Her name is Ingrid Rink, and she couldn't be more different from the loud, sharp-edged persona people see from Tyrus on TV. Where he's bold and unfiltered, she's disciplined, focused, and driven in a completely different way. Ingrid didn't come from fame, wrestling, or media. She built herself from the ground up with nothing but discipline and a stubborn dedication to fitness. Born in 1981 and raised in a supportive entrepreneurial family, she skipped the traditional college route and made an early decision most people would never dare make. She went all in on the fitness world at just 15. By 16, she was already teaching classes on her own, a level of confidence and commitment that made her stand out long before anyone knew her name. Her passion paid off. Over the years she earned multiple certifications, built a strong reputation, and developed a unique approach to training that focused on shaping your entire lifestyle, not just a workout routine. She eventually created her own brand, the Rink Routine, a program built around the idea that your daily habits determine your entire life. And she wasn't just talking. She lived it. But what most people don't realize is that her most successful business came from something far more personal. When her son from a previous marriage was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, Ingrid stepped in the only way she knew how, with fierce discipline and problem-solving. She created precise, portion-controlled meals to manage his condition, and the results were so impressive that friends began asking for them too. Within a few months, what started as a mother trying to protect her child turned into Sensible Meals, a company that grew into one of the largest meal prep businesses of its kind. By the time she crossed paths with Tyrus, Ingrid wasn't just a fitness instructor. She was an entrepreneur with a powerful sense of direction. She had her own life, her own success, and a quiet strength that didn't need attention to feel real. And somehow, that balance was exactly what Tyrus didn't know he needed. While his world was loud, unpredictable, and constantly shifting, hers was structured and grounded. They were complete opposites, but in a way that made their connection impossible to shake. And once their lives intertwined, their story only grew more intense, especially when the world finally discovered they weren't just dating. They were building a life. By the time Tyrus and Ingrid crossed paths, both of them were already carrying enough life experience to fill a book. They didn't rush into the spotlight together, and they didn't turn their relationship into a public storyline. Instead, they built something steady behind closed doors. For as far back as 2014, the two were already inseparable, showing up for each other in ways most people never saw. While his career pulled him in every direction, wrestling, TV, travel, late-night appearances, she became the steadiness he didn't even realize he needed. Tyrus never talked much about it publicly, but when he finally did, he didn't hold back. In 2020, he proposed, calling Ingrid his everything, and saying she deserved the world. It wasn't a flashy moment. No staged cameras. Just a simple emerald ring and a promise he meant with his whole chest. And even after the engagement, he still casually referred to her as his wife, long before the paperwork said so. But real life doesn't run on social media timelines. Their wedding didn't happen until 4 years later. In January 2024, they finally made it official, registering their marriage license quietly in Clark County. No publicity push, no televised event. Just two people sealing something they had already lived for years. Together, they blended a family that didn't fit the typical picture. Kids from previous relationships, a shared daughter, busy schedules, constant travel. And yet, they managed to make it work with a kind of loyalty that doesn't need attention or applause. He supported her businesses. She stood with him through career highs and lows. And every time the world tried to pull them into chaos, they found their way back to each other. It wasn't perfect. It was real, and that's what made their bond stronger than anything happening on screen. But the biggest test of their relationship came when a storm hit their family from the outside. And the entire situation went public. Just when Tyrus' career was hitting its stride on television, a storm broke out that neither he nor Ingrid could have prepared for. In 2019, accusations surfaced from his former co-host Britt McHenry, claiming he had sent messages that crossed the line. The situation exploded online, and suddenly their family found themselves dragged into a spotlight they never wanted. Reports claimed Fox investigated the matter internally, and later on, McHenry filed a lawsuit that pushed everything into an even heavier, more chaotic public debate. None of this played out like a dramatic movie scene. It wasn't loud. It was exhausting. It wasn't fast. It dragged on. And for Tyrus and Ingrid, it wasn't just headlines. It became late-night conversations, heavy mornings, and a level of stress that didn't care who was watching. The case eventually ended with an undisclosed settlement, but by the time the dust settled, the emotional toll had already taken its swing. Ingrid rarely speaks publicly, but when she finally broke her silence in 2022, the truth slipped through her words. She said the trauma their family endured couldn't even be described. That one sentence said more than any interview ever could. Behind the scenes, she carried the weight in ways only a partner can, protecting her kids, supporting her husband, and trying to keep their home from falling apart under pressure. But the surprising part wasn't the struggle. It was the shift. Ingrid revealed that during this entire ordeal, Tyrus stepped deeper into his role as the stabilizer of the family. When she was running on fumes, he made sure she didn't collapse under everything happening around them. And for a man known for being blunt, loud, and confrontational on camera, his private approach couldn't have been more different. He became the quiet anchor when everything else felt unstable. It wasn't a moment they wanted, but it was a moment that changed them, and showed what their relationship actually looked like when everything was on the line. And that turning point shaped the home life that nobody expected. A home filled with chaos, creatures, and a different kind of family routine entirely. People who only know Tyrus from TV have no idea what his house looks like. They imagine a guy with a big personality, maybe some trophies, maybe a gym in the garage. What they don't expect is a home that feels like a small wildlife center. Exotic fish, snakes, chameleons, turtles, lizards. A collection that would shock anyone who thinks he's just a TV commentator. And the funniest part? Ingrid didn't even like animals at first. But instead of resisting it, she embraced it, fully. She became the unofficial animal curator of the house, organizing feeding schedules, upgrading enclosures, and even playing nature sounds at night to encourage breeding. She joked that she simply bossed everyone around. But the truth is she brought order to a home that could have easily turned into chaos. Each kid had a role. Their daughter Georgie handled the playful pets. Rhett helped with the heavy lifting. Others cleaned tanks and watched over the reptiles. It wasn't just a house. It was a system. A strange, surprisingly wholesome system. And while their home expanded, so did Tyrus' role as a father. He opened up publicly about one of his children being trans, sharing that they were going through therapy and figuring out who they wanted to be. His message was simple. When the time came, he would be there, fully supporting whatever they decided. After decades of building identities in the ring, on TV, and through controversy, fatherhood became the one role he refused to compromise. He even stepped away from wrestling once his kids admitted they wanted him at their games more than in the spotlight. That single moment ended his in-ring career for good. And that choice brought his story full circle. A man who grew up without steady guidance becoming the steady force his children now rely on. Looking back at everything Tyrus lived through, it's hard not to see his life as one long fight, not just in the ring, but in every chapter he survived. From a childhood marked by rejection, to careers that rose and collapsed, to unexpected controversy and emotional storms, he had every reason to fade out of the spotlight. But every time the world pushed him down, he found a new version of himself waiting in the wreckage. And beneath all the noise, the breakthroughs, and the public chaos, one truth kept showing up. Reinvention wasn't his last resort. It was his greatest skill. And through all those transformations, there was Ingrid, the person who didn't need fame, didn't need attention, and didn't need to stand under the lights to matter. While the world argued about his career, his takes, his character, she quietly became the balance he never had growing up. She built her own life, raised her own kids, built businesses from nothing, and still became the force that kept him grounded when everything else tried to shake him apart. Their story isn't perfect. It isn't polished. It isn't the type of fairy tale people post online. It's real, full of mistakes, pressure, rebuilding, and choices that forced them to grow whether they were ready or not. And maybe that's why it stands out. Because behind every headline and every reinvention, there was a family trying to stay standing, and a man finally learning how to show up for the people who waited for him. In the end, Tyrus' life isn't just the story of a wrestler, a TV personality, or a controversial public figure. It's the story of someone who refused to let his past define his future. Someone who reinvented himself again and again until he found a version of life that finally made sense. And whether people agree with him or not, there's no denying the transformation. Because the real story isn't how he became famous, it's how he managed to hold on, rebuild, and keep becoming someone new long after everyone thought he was finished. And that journey isn't over. It's just finally starting to make sense.